it's my job now to sort of close out the night of this CityView, our last CityView of the fall. Man, it's been so great hanging with you guys. I had another talk planned earlier, and this afternoon I was just sort of not loving it, I guess, and sort of threw it out the window, literally, because I was up here, and so it's outside if you want to see it. And so I had this talk planned. I found this really cool verse in Lamentations, which nobody ever talks about because it's kind of a sad book. And so I was really excited about that, showing some love to Lamentations. And as I was sort of wrapping up the whole talk, it ended up being kind of sermon-y, which I try not to do at CityView because I feel like it's discussion-oriented, not me just telling you what the truth is, but helping all of us to find the truth together. So it was kind of sermon-y, and it ended up being like these 3 points to becoming a better adult or something. And then I started thinking about it, and I was like, I wonder if that's actually like the last thing that we need, right? I mean, how many of you guys see those like blogs and posts on Facebook, and they're like, 10 things you must do in your 20s, or the 5 things every adult should have, or what I wish I could tell my 25-year-old self. I don't know about you guys, but I'm like addicted to those. I cannot pass one up and without reading it. I mean, I read every single one. I have a list of like 253 things that I should be doing as an adult right now, and I'm failing at like 196 of them. So it's not really going well for me, but I still can't stop reading them every time I see one. And so I was sort of processing that and that kind of idea, and I had this moment where I was confronted with my unadulthood recently. So about a week ago, my wife and I, we went to the doctor because Sarah is pregnant. I don't know if you guys know that. Yeah. That's why I'm gaining this sympathy weight right here. Yeah. So that's an exciting thing, right? And so we went to the doctor to go to the ultrasound, which is sort of an intimidating experience, and it's very adultish. One of those big moments in your life, like your bar mitzvah maybe that the Funky Pelican Pleasure Club could play, or getting your driver's license or something. It's one of these like big life hurdles, right? And so we go in there, and it's not like the movies where they have the little robot thing. It looks like R2-D2 with the screen on it, and, there's this loud sound. It's not like that, at least not at wonderful Ochsner Baptist. And we went in there, and Sarah had like a big recliner she could sit on with these really funny footrest things that she sort of, went up into. But I had to sit in like a regular chair. I didn't know what that was about. But it was all facing this giant TV. It was like we were in our living room or something, about to watch Netflix. And it's like kind of gray and fuzzy at first, and then all of a sudden, boom, baby pops up on the screen. Just got real, right? And I had this moment, this very brief and fleeting moment where I don't know why this is the image that pops in my head, but if you've ever seen Disney's Aladdin, and at the end, by the way, spoiler alert. So if you haven't seen 1992 Disney Aladdin, then you probably should close your ears, I guess. So at the end, Jafar becomes a genie. And he's like, he gets really big, and he has these planets he's like swirling around in his hands, and he just feels like sort of drunk on power and everything. That was this feeling that sort of washed over me. I was like, I have created life! And I shouted that out. The ultrasound tech was freaked out. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't say that. But that was how I was feeling for this like brief, fleeting moment. I had this thought where I was like, you know what? I'd been kind of like somebody had judged me, and I felt bad about it earlier in that week, but then I was thinking, that doesn't really matter if people don't like me anymore. I can just make my own, right? Now, that doesn't necessarily guarantee that they're going to like me, but at least I have that option, right? It's a lot of freedom. Now, immediately following this delusion of grandeur, obviously, was this wave of sort of like fear and trepidation, and this thought that, wait a second, I'm not adult enough to do this. I was kind of thinking, should I like go out in the hallway and look for another adult to come handle this situation? Because I am not at all adulty enough to do this. I need to find an adultier adult, perhaps. And I was even thinking as we were processing what this CityView was going to look like, we were trying to figure out how do you measure what an adult is? And that's why we asked that question over there. And there's been some really great answers on the board. But how do you measure what that is? We kind of came up with this idea. Ross actually brought it up, which, by the way, today is Ross Young's birthday. Give it up for Ross Young. He is becoming more adult by the minute, all right? Or getting older, at least. So Ross actually came up with this idea. We're just sitting around talking in our CityView planning meetings. They're actually a lot like CityViews, but less donuts. We have a good time and just sort of discuss these topics. And Ross was like, you know what? I don't think that Jesus would measure up very well as an adult. And we were all kind of like, whoa. Thought about it. He has no home, right? So he's basically a homeless guy. He wasn't married by the time he was 30. That was probably an even bigger deal back then than it is today, right? Because they got married at like 13 and 15, right? So he wasn't married. He had no family. He had no kids, no house, no regular job. I mean, if you think about it, he was really just like a single guy hanging out with his 12 bros, traveling the countryside, on a road trip, couch surfing from town to town. I mean, he was like a step above gutter punk, like no joke. And I mean, it's crazy. He would never qualify as adult in our society or in his, which is sort of an astounding thought. And yet, he had the audacity to tell people that he knew the secret to abundant, to full, to complete life. He knew how to live life best, and he was telling people they could do that. And yet, he wasn't even making the cut as like, a standard adult kind of thing. It got me thinking, where do we come up with these measures for what an adult is? So think about some measures maybe that you feel like you've been failing at like recently. Maybe it's, waking up on time. Maybe it's working out. Maybe it's just, moving forward with your life goals. Where do these measures come from? Where do they come from? Do they come from your parents? Do they come from television and movies and that kind of thing? Are they just like general cultural expectations? Do they come sort of like one of you guys asked actually about like comparing yourself on Facebook or on Instagram or something like that? Where do these metrics come from? And if so, like how do we understand them? I started thinking about that a lot, and as I was processing it, I came up with this idea, and I think it can be important in my life and in yours. And it's this idea that we have to stop trying to live up to someone else's definition of adult. We have to stop trying to live up to someone else's definition of an adult and live as best we can like Jesus. Because he's the only one that's offering this full and abundant life. We don't even know what the goal is when we finally reach, maximum adult status. But Jesus says, when you are following me, when you are trying to live like me, I will offer you the full, abundant, best life that you could possibly live. Now, I'm not going to tell you exactly what it looks like to live like Jesus. This is CityView after all, so I'm going to send you with some homework. We don't have a December CityView, so you got 2 months off to take care of this. But as you're processing what it looks like to live as an adult, and you're trying to process what it looks like to live your life, my challenge to you is to go and find out how Jesus did it. So if you're struggling with setting your priorities, read through the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and figure out just exactly what were Jesus' priorities. If you're juggling time and sort of failing at it like I am, take a look. See what Jesus did with his time. See how he spent it. See how he decided to spend his time. There's stories in the gospel where Jesus is saying to people, no, I don't have time for that. I want to focus on this, which is sort of a powerful thought, but I'm giving away some of your homework. Also, take a look at how Jesus treated people. What were the type of people that he invested in, that he cared for, that he spent time with? What were the type of people that he didn't necessarily spend as much time with? See how that applies to your life. Maybe even take a look at how Jesus dealt with money, at how he related to money, how he spent it, how he saved it, how he kept it, how he gave it away, whatever that looks like. Go home, take a look, and see what it looks like, because I guarantee you that is the only route that's going to take you to this full and abundant life. The most fascinating thing about this entire thought that I had is this idea that Jesus lived the most perfect and best life, right? Jesus was, even though he didn't measure up on these adult standards, on the life scale, he was like way off the chart, right? And yet, he came down to live his life perfectly in the best way possible for people like you and me who kind of fail at life sometimes, right? For people who are going to screw up at life. I mean, think about just the irony of that for just a moment. This idea that Jesus lived the best life only for people who are going to live bad lives, worse lives, not perfect lives, lives where we fail, lives where we screw up, lives where we do the wrong thing sometimes. Jesus lived his life for people just like you and me, people just like that. That's a fascinating thought to me. And so if you don't really know what that means, if you're kind of confused as to how that works, that Jesus would live his life for people like us, I encourage you to come up and have a conversation with me afterwards. That's what CityView is all about, is discussing and growing and getting closer to the truth with each other. So I'd encourage you to come up and talk with me about that afterwards. That's kind of our concluding thought as we head out from this last CityView, is this idea that we are all not supposed to be living up to someone else's definition of an adult, but trying as best we can to live like Jesus. Because even if we fail at that, we're still living a more worthwhile life than we ever could be trying to live up to any other definition. You know, as I thought about it, and sort of even as processing, one day being a father, it sort of puts into context, it takes away this adult question and almost puts into context this idea of like when my kids are my age and they look back on my life and, what I've been doing, and I'll probably be dead by then because my diet is just terrible and never exercise. But I want them to look at me and I want them to say, he didn't always do the right thing. He didn't always live a perfect life, but he was trying to live like Jesus. That was all he cared about. That was his main goal in life. And if that's the case, then I'll know that I did all right, that I did the best that I could. So I know that doesn't end in like this sort of go out and challenge thing, but I hope that speaks to you tonight. I hope that offers you something to think about and something to process as we wrap our minds around this idea of adultish.